Hello, and welcome back to the Mist Podcast. I am your host, Aramis. Today I'm going to talk about my experience with 5-MEO DMT, or as many people know it as the toad venom. This experience is very, very different, and something even to this day that it makes me want to try it one more time to understand the experience itself, because I still feel like I have not been able to comprehend exactly what I experienced on that psychedelic. But it was compared to regular DMT was an entirely different level of what I was not necessarily wanting to experience, but what felt more productive for my psyche and felt more productive for anything to do with me spiritually, mentally, physically, just as anything to do with my existence. So it's also a note to anyone that is attempting to try these substances on your own. I highly recommend you just do your research. Know compounds before you ingest them. Please do not do things not fully comprehending what's going on. I can't, and no one can stop anybody from doing anything, and this isn't just for DMT, but for literally any other substance you put in your body, including your food. Do your research, know what you put in your body. Don't be uneducated about these things. But specifically for a substance like DMT, 5-MEO DMT, if you're going to take it in, then there's precautions of understanding how not to waste any, all those other things. I'm not the person to tell you. You can go look that up yourself. But just letting you know that anytime you're trying to get into something, it's probably good to educate yourself. And there's a lot of misinformation out there on, not even misinformation. I feel like there's not enough education, so there's not really enough of really guiding people with some of these substances. So I think it's important to just throw the precautionary out there to everybody to understand that, know what you're getting into, at least before you start getting into it. Now, my experience with this was I tried a couple different ways of putting it in, just some of the blunts I was rolling at the time. And that experience is way different than actually being able to hit that substance as you were supposed to vaporize it. And massive difference. But the real thing I want to talk about is that experience that I have on taking it how you're supposed to. It's actually hard for me to remember. I'm pretty sure it was the toad venom. When I was putting it into the blunts, I could taste it a lot more, and the experience was never as well, I guess some of those I was putting regular DMT too, so I have to remember that. There was a time period a couple years ago where I was just trying to understand what's going on, and I wanted to not feel scared taking them, but I wanted to still understand and dip my toes in like a shaman and get the experience and just kind of get some form of detail on what I'm encountering before I just dive all the way in. Just the idea of fully letting go of your body and its existence, for me personally, is something that's a very vindictive feeling in an experience to let go. So my early starting points of dealing with psychedelics, this is all around the same time, it was very difficult for me to just go all the way in and just have this idea that I'm not going to be here anymore. And it terrified me in a very odd way, but that's a whole different topic for a different line of things. But to let you know that trying a small tidbit of substances, if you're going to do them, can be a very good way to let you have a small idea of what's going on if you don't feel very comfortable. Because at the end of the day, no matter what you do with it, it's not going to hurt you, and you're going to come back. So it's just the next 20 minutes after you hit that could be a whole different thing. But it's intricate and it's interesting. Exactly what's going on per substance to substance. I would never do regular DMT again. It just is not. It's a different line of experience, and that's why when I think of 5-MEO, I'm like, okay, so now that I'll actually get to the experience here. Being underneath that substance, because it's short, just like regular DMT, 12 minutes, 15 minutes. But it's important to remember that the effects of these substances, because everyone just takes in the like real peak point of the experience, but not the overall of like how the substance is really affecting the rest of your body. And 5-MeO DMT more specifically, or any DMT in general, is underneath the same effect that kind of how psilocybin is. Like, technically, psilocin is still traced in your bloodstream for a specific amount of time. It's still adhering to effects of helping your spinal fluid productivity, other things like that. And it takes time for it to fully flush out of you. It's not like all the effects are just completely gone, non-invasive, whatever. You know what I mean? So in this complete case, when I'm taking this substance, it was very interesting that regular DMT is extremely visual, but 5-MeO is not visual, like at all. And so when you close your eyes and you see this moving anything, even if you're not tripping, any person can close their eyes and you can like look out the window, or you can look at light, and you will see the change difference between light and dark. That is going to be there. Now, what that is for every single person and how you would describe it, like obviously that's going to be different, but there is a perception of light to every point of your eye, every person's eye, that is there something, right? Per se. Just because of how your eyes obviously function. They're intaking light, and if there's light there to be intaken, regardless if your eyelids are closed, it's going to be perceptible and perceivable there. So what I'm getting at is that whenever that happens with 5-MeO, it was like, not like detailed fractal patterns. And by detailed fractal patterns, I mean like being able to visually see this like beautiful landscape unfold in front of you. Is like if you went and YouTubed fractals, or you YouTubed fractal landscapes, or Mandelbrot, or anything like that, right? What I was visually comprehending was like, the point of that substance was not visual. It had nothing conceptually to do with trying to visually comprehend you into something, right? Because there's different ways the brain is geometrically picking up any type of signal, right? And what you're visually seeing with your eyes versus what you're hearing with your ears, right? Geometry of the ears, music, geometry of the vision, right? What you see with your eyes, the vision, is geometry. So if every intake to your senses is geometry, then you can kind of categorize different substances upon how they're changing your perception of reality, or how they're altering you. And 5-MeO specifically was just not doing that in a visual premise. It was taking me, or in my specific experience, to this centerfold of what I would perceive as the ninth dimension. But more conceptually, the higher you get in dimensions, the less physical there is whatsoever, and it's all just pure, nothing but pure vibration. And so when you start stacking that ladder, that's kind of what it felt like 5-MeO was taking me into. And so to put that in a perpetual perspective, that if regular DMT is giving you more of a visual premise of these lower dimensional fractal opportunities for you to experience for a short span of time, then technically 5-MeO was doing the upper hand side of that, the 4 or 5 to 7, or 4 or 5 to 9 probably is the better way to put that, dimensions, for you to be able to go in and comprehend and perceive anything of what's going on in general. But the visual detail of what's going on was not there. If I closed my eyes, it was almost as if like an electrical geometric pattern was flashing. Not like flashing, like, completely off and completely on, but like semi-pulsing, where it's very bright, but it's not completely dimming when it falls out, if that makes sense. It's just like a pulsing. Underneath that pulsing, it felt like there was, if you could ever ask a question, and I think I'm about to really lock in something inside of my own head of how that substance changed me. Oh my God. Is when you go there via 5-MeO, you're going to the more specific secular points of information where it's as pure as it's going to be. There's no form, there's no dilution, because when you start bringing information down, technically you're diluting it, because it has to go through all these other things to eventually get to a perceptionable, to be perceived, and whatever different manifold or light spectrum it's getting perceived at. But 5MEO is like, it felt like all the questions I ever could ask were answered. Everything that I ever could have thought through at a deep level and a deep point was just like solved. As if in the and that's why I was saying I really wish someone was recording me the whole time I was doing this, because it was like, even recalling the experience right now is insane. I could not stop talking, and I've never talked faster in my entire life. And I do avidly talk fairly fast, and especially whenever I'm going on about something that I understand or comprehend, and I'm giving all that information out. When I was underneath that substance, it was like a times 50 times 100. Like I was just do. And it just like, I was just like pouring from the download of information I'm getting from the universe. But it's just like, I now understand and I now realize, not necessarily the point of like knowing everything. I really don't like that perception, because I don't, and I only understand things from my limited perception and my limited understanding. And I say limited because putting this and putting that into words and then trying to prose it into your comprehensibility or anybody else's is like not, I don't know everything, and nobody does. And nobody is aware of every single thing at the exact same, you know what I mean? So it's, but when it seemed very interesting to me that after that happened and forward in my existence, that many people would ask questions and I would have some form of answer. And even if that answer was just giving a vague response or ideology of like helping them attempt to comprehend it, so that they could then find or figure out what they would like to do to find out, because everyone's trying to always find information, and whenever you are trying to find and get information, it will come to you. All of it will come to you, no matter what you do. And I'm now comprehending and understanding a part of why I unlocked or had been given the opportunity to be able to answer questions for people that they are seeking an answer to. And I'm sure many people can say that they've also done this, but and they have. Everyone is a bearer of information. I just don't want to make it statured like I'm saying this in a perception of pinnacleizing it to any degree. But what I'm saying is that I started to begin to understand part of what I am capable of fulfilling as my role in society, which is essentially being the capacitor of ideas and being able to bring in this comprehensibility that can seem a little bit difficult for some people when they're trying to understand something. And maybe they have a grasp on it, but just giving a very and much easier comprehensibility to something can be the entire way that we shift our understanding via an explanation. And everything is only as good as the explanation you provide for someone to have an understanding of it anyway. So what that trip specifically almost itself is like bringing me into is like showing me spiritually that I can handle this world of information, this access to information, and then at the same time being able to bring that down inwardly effectively to make other people be able to comprehend it. And it's just that like I am able to do that, and there's other people that are able to do that, but I was one of the people that's able to do that. And man, that's what in the, and this is like, when you look at everything in existence, it feels like all in itself that it's like a psychedelic trip, where it's trippy as fuck. Like it's. And I say this is because you don't need substances to have a very emphatic or very explosive or intense experience spiritually. You don't. You can do that with deep meditation. Like you can do it with breath work. These are things that you don't have to acquire via doing a substance. A substance in some way is technically just the medium at that point, if you really want to put it like that. But with 5-MeO, I still to this day have never experienced anything like that. I've never had a single psilocybin trip that was ever like that, except maybe once. I think about that. There's one time I was taking 2 grams of, I don't exactly remember which strain, but I was taking 2 grams and I just could not stop talking. It's like I just got this massive informational download and I'm just like, it's just coming, it's just going. I'm just spewing all of it out. And I just could not stop talking for like 3 or 4 hours. And that is the only other time I've ever felt that. But it's interesting. The world, our existence, everything about us is intricate and beautiful in a different way when you start having, or you have certain psychedelic experiences. And it's just like, it puts me in a different type of awe even right now, like comprehending, understanding, and realizing like what's there, how many layers, like just, man, there's so much. And that's why life feels so trippy, is because there's so much going on at once. There's so much shit always happening at one single time on every layer of every spiritual venture, every dimensional layer. It's and when you do DMT, you start to really get into some of those upper or uncomprehendable layers outside of that substance. And man, that's, I would definitely try that substance again, because I'm still trying to, like, taking it that long. I've only done it once, and right now I'm having that realization. Obviously tells me why I haven't tried it since, and it's just, well, maybe you need to reflect on that a little bit more. And that's a very important thing sometimes. It's like there's so much information embedded in a trip itself that, like, you being able to grab all of that in an intense fashion, even if you're, spiritually able to handle it, is a lot. And then re-articulating that down, re-comprehending it, and then putting it back into your existence is a whole different, like, level of, it's a lot. And so that's kind of why, paying attention to detail in your regular existence is important, of course, but then being able to transfer paying attention to things while you are really deep in a spiritual experience is probably the most important thing ever. Because that's where you are the capacitor to the key. You are the key to unlock all of what you or anyone ever seeks. And that's just from, like, the foundation of understanding we are particles. And we're just a blown up form of that, essentially. We're just living in a fractal world. I have an episode about fractals you should definitely go check out. Where I go deeply into understanding and talking exactly about how we spiritually experience fractals and the fractalization of our existence. Not just from a pure geometrical form, but outside of that. So there are many psychedelics you can take that will not, and I would say, unless you are already prone to having, honestly, not even that. Really, when it comes down to psychedelics, regardless of who you are, it's about somewhat having the education behind what you're getting involved in. And I'm kind of putting this out there to hopefully extend some more information about some of these substances, because they truly should not be outlawed. There's something that, like, at least if we went to an ideal world per se, and we had more of a spiritual scientific study behind certain psychedelics, especially the ones used in ancient cultures, it just, there's even legal DMTs, whatever. You can, Rogan's even talked about this kind of stuff. They've gone into it, whatever. And there's so much to unpack just from what the substance is going to do to you. Like, from your auditory change. And I still think back on, like, in the midst of that experience, specifically, the pulsing I was feeling, because it really felt like I was just getting all this information. And I just, like, was unlocked. And, like just a new part of, like, my brain and how I'm wired just kind of unfolded. And it just became something completely different when I started just talking, and it's just like everything I could have ever been curious about, or like the conspiracy theories or whatever. It's like when you no longer live in uncertainty, then you don't ask yourself redundant questions and waste your own time. And I think that's kind of where I was at whenever it came to it. You have to remember that underneath DMT, like, psilocybin's a little different because you can still be underneath that substance for a long time, but I would get something ready. Like, record yourself speaking on it if you're going to, or like, something like that to give a reference, because I still, and that's part of why I want to try it again, is because I want to be able to not only, like, understand this experience, and maybe it won't even be the same one, but understand, like, what's going on, because it seemed like it was important. But, like, this obviously opened a doorway into changing who I am fundamentally in a really great way. I think it's just one of the few things that has, like, opened and enveloped me into being able to be here in general, but to find my peace and my happiness and all those other things that I think are extremely important whenever you're trying to be under your psychedelic journey, is that, like, they will always be a curtail of giving you the experience that you need for your growth. And if you just don't seek that in some way or another while you're doing the substance, then it's not going to, it might not. That's when people start having bad trips, is because when you start fighting instead of just accepting and enveloping and existing in what is there and what is the truth, then you're gonna feel constantly shooken up and rattled. And that's why, once again, but I think it's so important that, like, if you're gonna do something like this and something like that can happen, like taking 5-MeO DMT, and I tell you that there's a possibility that me or you or somebody else could have that same prognosis, then make sure you're ready to, like, jot it down, remember what you said, or unpack it, because, like, you don't know what gems are right there. Like, I wish I could remember what I said in that moment, but because of me just being so fucked up, the only people that could remember were the people around me, and they probably won't remember because of how long ago that was, and right, but that information could still be valuable. I could dig it out even then, but, like, that's kind of my point, is, like, remember what these substances are helping you accomplish and what they're doing, which is usually giving you access to more information than you already are able to perceive, and in a very much more, like, your spirit probably can handle this, and that's why you're taking the substance anyway, but now you taking it is going to kick you through the door, so you finally can just grasp, understand, and comprehend what you've always been able to do without the substance to begin with, but you would never go you would not be able to comprehend getting yourself to that gate specifically without the substance ever giving you the kick, because you cannot experience what you have never experienced before. You cannot feel what you have never been able to comprehend feeling. You can, right? Now, there are things that can be learned in that same practicality, and the same thing could be like if you dumb this down, like meditating, right? Like some people are like, I can't meditate. Well, there's obviously a reason why you can't go into your own internal world, and that's entirely on a whole port of, like, how this world has deteriorated people, and that's kind of where things can really shake you up. But with 5-MeO more specifically, man, I I'm sure I'll get to experience that again, but that was nuts. I feel like I'm going to put regular DMT in an entirely different video. Just because that in itself is kind of like a whole different type of comprehensibility. We're talking about visual. And I will also say, yeah, no, I remember my ears were ringing on the 5-MeO too. And that's something that, like, it's just like if you sit there and you sit in silence, your ears are still picking up frequency. Like, there's technically no actual silence. And when you start getting into the spiritual side of it, you just start like whew, it's there. One way or another. I hope we get back to the point where those substances are put back into society, because they are very transformative. And I think ancient cultures really showed that. As it was, they're way more advanced than we are now. And that's pretty obvious to see. But looking at it now, with where we're at, if something like that, knowing the power behind it, was much more obtainable for the regular average person, and, like, you know, everyone plays a role in society, so that's why I think it's important to remember that, like, if you're seeing any of the videos that I'm putting out here and you're listening to me, then it's probably because you are able to handle or need to hear, or whatever it is. Like, this information is just a part of, like, coming to you because it needed to come to you. And hopefully this helps some other people in some form or way, or, you know, educationally. But I think it's important to talk about this experience, and important to make sure we keep note of these types of experiences under psychedelics, so, like, we can have a real common ground on furthering research, but also furthering education on it. Like, when I get to the psilocybin video, that's probably going to be the longest video I have, because, boy, we got a lot. There's a lot to go over. And it's because with that substance, I've also had more time to, like, evaluate, to understand it, and get some idea or get a grasp on what's going on, why it's happening, you know, even outside of having a big trip. And I just think gathering all of this information can be an informative resource to make sure that other people have the best time doing whatever the substances that they're going to do, especially since I fully consider these non-invasive, non-detrimental, and they're not going to make anybody harm nobody. I mean, even a bad trip, the worst that you're going to see is the truth. And if you can't handle the truth, then it's going to feel intense. Yeah, it's not easy to handle what the truth really is, especially when you finally get to see the passion of it. But that's just... the mind is powerful. So, once again, if you have any questions, if you'd like me to cover a topic, talk about an experience that I have, or anything along those lines, then by all means, please hit me up on any of my socials. All my DMs are open. Thank you so much for listening. I will see you in the next one. I'm kind of pausing because I'm like, do I have anything else on this trip? That trip, I'm still trying to comprehend it. So I'm like, bro, I might do an update to this in the future. I'll do a part 2 where I, you know, probably rewatch this and I'll break it down a little bit more, because, man, it's still, it's like, whew, like, I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.